What's the most valuable but overlooked piece of kit that you carry? Let's talk about that. A couple of months ago, I went and did a spoon carving course over the course of a weekend. On the first morning that we woke up, the Saturday morning, we were sort of having a chat around the campfire, and it became clear that a couple of people had left behind, they'd forgotten to bring some, what I would consider fairly rudimentary and standard pieces of kit to make their lives more comfortable in the outdoors. And we had a chat about that. And I didn't really think much more about it until recently, when I've started to consider what the most valuable, but not necessarily from a monetary perspective, what's the most valuable piece of kit that I carry and that you might carry that often doesn't spring to mind. It might not be the most obvious piece of kit, it might not be the thing that springs to the tip of our tongue, but actually when we sit back and really think about it, it's incredibly valuable. That's what I've been thinking about this week. From my perspective, the most valuable but easily overlooked piece of kit that I carry is this. It's my Thermarest Neo-Air X-Therm inflatable sleeping mat. Hell of a mouthful. That's the most valuable but overlooked piece of kit that I think I carry. Why is it valuable? Well, we know that when we're operating outdoors, regardless of the time of year or the weather conditions, if you lay on the floor, even in the height of summer, you will get cold very, very quickly. We know that if you get cold when you're trying to sleep, you're not going to have a good night's sleep. And we know the impact of not having a good night's sleep has on us, even if we're at home, let alone outdoors working harder physically than we're perhaps used to. So for me, getting a good night's sleep is imperative. Now you might think, well, why isn't Craig mentioning his sleeping bag here? Because surely that's a part of his sleeping kit. And indeed it is. And if you want to have a look at my sleeping system and how I've hacked that over the years, then stay tuned to the end of the video where I'm going to share a video on my sleeping system hacks. But the reason I'm not suggesting sleeping bag is the most valuable but overlooked piece of kit is because I think your sleeping bag is obvious. You see your sleeping bag. You are in contact with your sleeping bag. It's a fairly obvious in-your-face piece of kit, whereas I don't think the sleeping mat necessarily is. And the reason I don't think it is that once you've inflated it, you don't really come into contact with it again until you deflate it. Depending on how you set your system up, and again, keep tuned to the video at the end of this video that I'm going to link to where I share how I set my sleeping system up, you may not even see this. This is invisible to me after I've inflated it. The way that I use it in my sleeping system, I don't see it again, let alone come in contact with it until I pack my sleeping system down. So it's easily overlooked. That's why I think it's the most overlooked. I see it at the beginning of my trip. I see it at the end of my trip. I come into contact with it at the beginning and end. And after that, it does its job. It just stays there on the floor, insulating me. Doesn't make a big deal. I don't come into contact with it. There's nothing sexy about it. Doesn't have sharp edges, right? Like a lot of people, I imagine, would jump to the fact that their knife is their most valuable piece of kit. And I'd probably agree with that, but I bet your knife isn't overlooked as much as your sleeping mat. And that is why, for me, my sleeping mat is my most valuable but easily overlooked piece of equipment. But what about your good self? Have a think about it. What do you take out with you without even thinking about it? It's just second nature. Once it's out there, you don't even think about it. It just does its job quietly in the background and doesn't make a big deal or a fuss about it. But yet it's incredibly valuable. Yet if you didn't have it, like if I didn't have my sleeping mat, it would become something of a big deal for your enjoyment or even your safety outdoors. Let me know in the comments below. Now, I've mentioned already in this video that I've got a couple of extra videos to share with you. They're both appearing on the screen now. One talks about how I set my sleeping system up, and the other is a direct review of this particular sleeping mat after about 2 or 3 years usage. If you've not seen those videos yet, or even if you have, go back and have a refresher, click on them now and check out a little bit more detail about my sleeping system. I'll see you in the next video, folks. Cheers.